Mark Henderson's life was a chain of boardroom victories, booming deals, and flashing cameras. The world saw him as the kind of man who could buy anything, a tycoon who built glass towers that touched the clouds. But beyond the gated drive, past the stone lions guarding his vast estate, there was a silence so deep it pressed against the walls. It wasn't the peaceful kind of silence. It was the kind that came from a life missing something essential. That something was his daughter, Lily. 7 years old, with the face of an angel and eyes so bright they seemed to hold the whole morning sky inside them. She was the center of his world, the only person who could melt the icy steel in his heart. But Lily had never walked a single step. The doctors had given their explanations in long, clinical sentences. Some called it a neurological disorder, others suspected developmental complications. Mark had hired the best in the country, rehabilitation specialists, physical therapists, child psychologists. He'd built an entire therapy room inside the mansion, equipped with the latest equipment, balance harnesses, resistance trainers, and mats so soft they felt like clouds. Still, nothing worked. Lily had learned to maneuver her wheelchair with surprising skill, and she moved through life with quiet acceptance. But Mark noticed the way her gaze followed other children who ran in the park. The way she sometimes placed her small hand on her leg as if willing it to wake up. And every time, a piece of his heart caved in. It was late one Wednesday afternoon when Mark arrived home earlier than expected. A deal overseas had been postponed, freeing his schedule for the first time in weeks. He expected to find the mansion exactly as it always was at that hour, dim, orderly, and almost too still. The front doors swung open, the cool scent of polished wood greeting him. He stepped inside, the echo of his leather shoes bouncing off the marble floors. Usually, Lily would be in her upstairs playroom with her new nanny, Maria, whom he had hired only 2 months ago. Maria was quiet, respectful, and seemed genuinely warm toward Lily, but Mark hadn't spent much time observing them together. As he walked past the grand staircase, something unusual caught his attention. A sound, soft at first, like the tinkling of wind chimes. Then it grew, clearer, warmer. Laughter. Not just any laughter, Lily's laughter. He stopped, frozen in the hallway. The sound didn't echo from her usual room. It was coming from the back of the house, past the kitchen, toward the garden doors. Mark frowned, curiosity pulling him forward. He moved quietly, almost afraid that if he made a noise, whatever was happening would stop. His hand brushed the edge of the wall as he turned the corner, and there it was again, light, bubbling giggles, broken by a joyful gasp. He couldn't remember the last time he had heard his daughter sound like that. The trail of sound led him to the tall glass doors that opened onto the back garden. The afternoon sun slanted low, spilling warm gold across the manicured lawn. He stopped just short of stepping outside. His breath caught. Through the glass, he saw Maria. She was barefoot, her long skirt brushing the grass, her dark hair loose and dancing in the breeze. And in her arms was Lily. Not in her wheelchair, not seated, standing. Mark's first instinct was alarm. His daughter had never been able to support herself. What was this woman doing? Was she putting her at risk? His mouth opened, ready to call out. But then he saw more. Maria was holding Lily close, her hands under the girl's arms, gently lowering her so that Lily's feet touched the grass. The little girl's toes curled, sinking slightly into the soft earth. Maria said something he couldn't hear, and Lily's face bloomed into a smile that could outshine the sun. Then, slowly, almost like a miracle unfolding, Maria began to move, guiding Lily in tiny, careful steps. Each movement was unsteady, trembling, but deliberate. The nanny's voice was low, soothing, her lips forming words that seemed to wrap Lily in courage. Mark felt the air leave his lungs. He stood rooted to the spot, unable to look away. He had spent fortunes on specialists, yet here, in the simplicity of a garden, this young woman had coaxed something out of his daughter that he had never seen before. And Lily, she was laughing. Not the polite giggle she gave to please adults, but a real, unguarded laugh, filled with the pure joy of discovery. She looked at Maria like she was part fairy, part friend, leading her down a path only they could see. Mark pressed his hand to the glass, his chest tight. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like the billionaire who could solve any problem by throwing money at it. He felt like a father, watching a miracle that money could never buy. Mark stayed frozen by the glass for a moment longer, afraid that moving or speaking would somehow break the fragile magic unfolding before him. Maria's bare feet pressed into the grass as she took a small backward step, her hands steady around Lily's small ones. The little girl's legs wobbled like a fawn's, her knees trembling with effort, but she didn't seem afraid. Instead, her eyes were fixed on something in front of her. Mark followed her gaze. A trail of flower petals had been sprinkled across the lawn, leading toward the old oak tree at the far end of the garden. The petals were bright against the green, like tiny spots of sunlight. Mark recognized them. They came from the rose bushes his late wife had planted. The sight of them always stirred something bittersweet in him. Maria must have taken the petals earlier, scattering them as though paving a path to something magical. It wasn't medical equipment or complicated therapy, it was a game. A story, something a child could believe in. Maria knelt slightly so she was at Lily's eye level, speaking in a soft, conspiratorial tone. "The fairy said the petals are stepping stones," she said, her voice carrying just enough for Mark to catch through the glass. "If we follow them, we'll find the treasure." Lily's mouth curved into a grin, her eyes sparking. She took another small step, her body leaning into Maria's support. The grass bent under her bare feet, and her toes clutched instinctively for balance. Step by step, they moved forward. Maria never rushed her. Every time Lily's knees shook, Maria adjusted her hold, letting her find her footing again. Sometimes Lily stumbled, but Maria didn't tighten her grip in panic. She simply steadied her, whispering something that made Lily nod and try again. Mark's heart clenched. For years, therapists had pushed Lily too hard, their voices clinical, their encouragement more like commands. This was different. This wasn't a session. It was play, adventure, and trust wrapped together. Halfway to the oak tree, Maria stopped. She glanced at the petals ahead, then looked back at Lily. "Do you want to take the next one on your own?" she asked gently. Mark leaned forward, hardly breathing. Lily hesitated, her lower lip caught between her teeth. Then she shook her head, her small fingers clutching Maria's tightly. "That's okay," Maria said immediately, her tone as light as the breeze moving through the leaves. "We'll do it together. The fairies are patient." They continued on, and something inside Mark shifted. It wasn't just Lily's steps that struck him, it was the complete absence of fear in her eyes. She wasn't thinking about falling. She wasn't thinking about failure. She was thinking about the petals, the fairy story, the treasure. Mark remembered the first time he'd tried to get Lily to stand. She had been only 3 years old. He had knelt in front of her in the therapy room, holding her under the arms, and told her she could do it. But the room had been cold, the equipment intimidating, and his voice, though he meant well, had been too urgent. She had cried, and he had carried her back to her chair, feeling helpless. Now, watching Maria, he realized something painful and beautiful at the same time. Lily had never needed more money spent, more machines, or more pressure. She had needed someone to make walking feel like magic. As they approached the old oak, Mark noticed how Maria occasionally loosened her grip for just a second, letting Lily's muscles take more of her weight before catching her again. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but it was there, small moments of independence disguised inside a game. When they finally reached the tree, Maria crouched down so Lily could touch the rough bark. "You did it," she whispered. "The treasure is here." From her skirt pocket, Maria pulled out a small wooden box. Lily's eyes widened as Maria placed it in her lap. Inside was a simple silver locket, its surface engraved with a delicate swirl. Lily opened it to find a tiny pressed flower inside, a violet. "It's from the fairy," Maria said softly. "She said it's for the bravest girl she's ever met." Lily clutched the locket to her chest, her smile wide and unrestrained. And Mark, still hidden behind the glass, felt something sting his eyes. For years, he had measured progress by charts, milestones, and percentages. Now, watching his daughter in the garden, he realized some victories could never be written on paper. They lived in moments like this, bare feet in the grass, petals leading the way, and a child believing that she was braver than she had ever known. The next afternoon, Mark asked Maria to continue her game, while he watched from the porch. The sun was dipping low, painting the sky in gold. Maria knelt beside Lily. "Remember, we're walking to the magic tree," she whispered. Lily's little face lit up with determination. One step, then another. Her legs wobbled, but Maria's grip was steady. When they reached the old oak at the edge of the garden, Maria let go, just for a second. Lily took a single, unaided step. Then she stumbled into Maria's arms, laughing. Mark's eyes burned. For years, he'd measured his success in skyscrapers and bank accounts. But that day, his greatest treasure was a single, unsteady step in the grass. And deep down, he knew, Maria hadn't just taught his daughter to walk. She had taught him how to hope again. That evening, the house wasn't silent anymore. It was alive. Mark sat in the living room, the fading scent of grass and rose petals still clinging to the air. Across from him, Lily sat curled in her wheelchair, clutching the silver locket in her small hands, occasionally looking down at it with a secret little smile. Maria moved quietly in the kitchen, humming the same soft tune she had sung in the garden. Mark found himself watching her, wondering how someone he barely knew had managed to do what years of experts could not. After dinner, Lily asked for something she had never asked before. "Daddy, can we go outside again tomorrow? I want to follow the petals." Her voice was light, full of a hope that had been missing for too long. Mark nodded, his throat tight. "Of course, sweetheart, we'll follow as many as you want." That night, as Lily slept, Mark stood by her doorway, watching the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. In all his life, he had closed deals worth millions, built empires from the ground up, and turned dreams into steel and glass. But he knew, without question, that nothing would ever compare to the sight of his daughter taking those first, trembling steps in the sunlight. Maria had given them more than progress. She had given them possibility. She had shown Lily that walking wasn't just about strength, it was about believing that every step led to something wonderful. And she had reminded Mark that sometimes, the most extraordinary changes begin with the simplest acts of kindness. The world still saw him as a billionaire. But from that day on, Mark measured his wealth differently, not in skyscrapers or bank balances, but in the sound of his daughter's laughter, the press of her feet against the grass, and the unshakable hope that one day, she would run. And deep down, he knew, that day was coming.